The first thing I ever engraved was this ring I made for my first girlfriend. Or, everyone go, or. I used a fish disgorger from an old pocket knife and a claw hammer to cut the letters. The squiggles were done at work soon after I started about 6 months later. Pretty rough, eh? Cursive or script is the most style requested, and why not? It's just classy if done right. There's plenty of samples you can copy, but basically the trick to make it look right is how you join and space the characters. The height of the capitals compared to the lowercase letters is usually half, but some tend to make the caps a little higher. Personal preference. Engraving is like handwriting. All the engravers I worked with knew each other's hand, and if a job came back wrong, we knew who to blame. This anodised aluminium plate is a leftover from an old job. The other side is silk screen and seems to cut well, but the back is not the best. It's a bit hard and grippy. A used burr seems to cut better than a new one. Now if you want stuff that engraves nice, get engraver's brass, an alloy that contains 2 to 3% lead. It's really nice. This style of engraving used to be called machine engraving, and chisel used to be called hand engraving. So now this is hand, and chisel is chisel, I think. Depends on who you talk to and where you live, I guess. Notice I don't do the traditional Y loop. This is more fancy, I reckon. I started doing my cursive cues like this years ago because the customers started complaining that it looks like a T, which it does. I actually had to Google it because I forgot what it looked like. When lining out, I mark the letters about where they're going to go, then mark from the centre and readjust. The easiest font to do is lowercase or italics on an angle. Vertical is perhaps a little more difficult for some people. You can calligraphy the letters somewhat by putting a little flick at the top and bottoms to jazz it up a bit. I also started putting a little curved stroke on the end of my W's and V's for a little bit more flair. I developed this somewhat half cursive style for the capitals, or semi-cursive, or semi-script maybe. I don't put the second loop on the end, saving space, and use this where cursive won't fit nicely on items like baby bracelets. It's okay if the kid's called Zoe, but Elizabeth is a bit of a squeeze. It also has better readability. Not a lot of people can read cursive as we live in the age of computers, Times Roman and the like. I also suggest this style on wedding bands, for example, where space is limited and we have to dodge the hallmarks and sometimes model numbers. This is just a piece of brass I cut up, and it's green brass, and it's given me a bit of grief. Gold and silver is way better to engrave. When the Lord of the Rings craze was sweeping the world, I was commissioned several times to reproduce the Elvish font onto rings. And it had to be right. Apparently the customers wanted authenticity in the hope the ring would have magical powers. A customer would front up to my counter and ask, "Can you do Elvish?" To which I replied, "Well, it's the one for the money. No, they insist. Elvish, not Elvis. Oh, like the elves talk, I ask. No, they scream. The Lord of the Rings. Oh, I think. One of those. What interesting people you meet in this trade. These were rather difficult because the line of script would take up most of the circumference, so I would have to pen it on. Well, one day I stuffed up, and even after marking it out, I ran out of room. So I erased it and started again, unbeknown to anyone. Sorry, but your ring was a bit lighter. Oopsies. Vertical fonts can be difficult, but anything on the slant is a lot easier, like this block. And it's easier to get the horizontal lines straight. Sometimes it's necessary to either condense or expand type to make it suit the job. Back to my saucepan, or rather fry pan. Well, you could use it as a saucepan, a low one. A popular lettering style which is used to take up more room and quickly done is this. The serifs are easy to do and a great font for flair. I miss the O because it's the same as the Q without the leg. The original T's were like this, but I modified it because it's more readable. A variation of this style is where we cut most of the vertical strokes straight, because a flat graver is sometimes used to thicken and equalise the main strokes. This is called a wiggle or wriggle cut and can be seen on many old trophies. You could also omit the downstrokes and just wiggle them in. I tend to hold the graver at a high angle to prevent slipping. And you can see if I slip here, I'm going to have a hole in my thumb. Well, I suppose I could move my thumb. You can chase the rounded letters, but it changes the light reflection angle and doesn't look as nice. Here I'm doing a shonky realignment of all the letters slightly to the right because I'm too lazy to recoat it. Old English is such a classy font, but the trouble is most designs are unreadable, so I've simplified the capitals to suit. Some variations don't have the curly bit on the bottoms, but I prefer this feature. I use the fine burr to do the thin line on some capitals and join it to the main downstrokes with a couple of hooks. Sometimes we have a boo-boo, either the engraver's fault or the customer's. Let's say that there is a mistake on this line. First, cut a snake across the entire line, then spirals at every peak. Then fill in the gaps with either 1 or 2 flicks. And maybe a flick at the ends like this. The correct spelling can now be done either above or below the boo-boo. My lowercase Old English has also been modified to be readable. It's a fun style, attractive and quite therapeutic. The Old English Sheepdog Club came back year after year because they just didn't like the other engravers' take on this age-old font. All hand engravers start from the bottom, and this is why. So we don't rub our lines off, and after so many times being asked why, I adopted the explanation that I have Chinese ancestry. Some actually go, oh, trying to detect any trace of Asiatic genes in my face. I'm so naughty. Roman is another nice font, but challenging. Those damn serifs can be a nightmare. I use an earbud with a bit of spit to realign the letters. It can turn your tongue black though. When marking out, there is a process known as kerning, which is gauging the area between the letters to get a uniform balance. Takes a bit of practice though. Basically, if you have 2 A's together, they will be closer than, say, 2 N's. With most fonts, always remember to cut the round letters and point slightly above and below the line, the same as sign writing or calligraphy. I do the wide strokes with a large burr, then use a smaller burr to do the thinner strokes, and an even smaller burr to do the serifs and the points. Doing the serifs is kind of like sculpting rather than engraving, trying to get that little curve just to be right. And then you've got to match it on all the other serifs. Any engraver in their right mind will refuse to do Roman because it's so bloody hard to get right. This is where a computer engraver comes in handy. Button pushers, see what I mean? I'm going to try this again with serifs on top of the M and the A. That's a bit better, but still a bloody nightmare. Just refuse. No, we don't do Roman here, sorry. Not single line anyway. A common approach for large letters is to double the thick strokes and shade. This can be used for all fonts and gives the job a professional feel. On large letters like this, I will lightly scratch an outline so I don't rub off the lines as I work. This also allows me to do slight adjustments while cutting. I know you're waiting for it. Pretty. I did this in about 1983, and when I asked why the bell was still intact and the steering wheel engraving was gone, they said that the bell was re-engraved. Goodbye, daughter. Nice knowing you. Yeah, I got conned into climbing the rigging too. Shaylee! I just wanted a better view. Is that how you spell Rachel? Don't you hate it when a word you've done thousands of times suddenly becomes unfamiliar? If there's any calligraphers out there that have taken up engraving because of my videos, it'd be great to hear from you. Join me next week for a bit of glass engraving. Cheers for now.